to address that. Following the acquisition, I've had a good view of what's happening in the other countries, specifically in this space. So I've been over to Amsterdam, I've been into Paris, I've been in Frankfurt, London, Milan, where all the TelecityGroup operations are, and seeing what's driving the growth in those organisations, what opportunities are out there in the digital space, content and media, massive driver for data centres, data centre locations. So each of those countries have put in place a strategy to try and attract and develop business of that nature, because that's where they see the high growth. From an Irish perspective, I think we're well positioned, certainly in the metropolitan area, from a data centre services provider perspective, but also from a broadband transatlantic connectivity perspective and from power. But we are lacking in some of the connectivity that's required to attract some of the really big digital companies into the country. So we're still looking to pull in, I think, a large Asian carrier into Ireland. In Europe, it's very easy to attract these guys because of the bigger marketplace, and it's all land based. Getting in as an island, we've got to be able to attract some of these providers in here. So maybe a Tata or one of these type of businesses to bring in fibre of their own. I know there's some talk to bring in this Emerald cable over to Belmullis sometime in 2013. Yet fully not defined yet what that's going to be and whether it's fully funded. We've got the good cross European connectivity already that's in place, and we think with our Hibernian Atlantic stuff, we're well serviced to be able to offer pretty much the type of speeds we need to bring in anything from North America or anything from mainland Europe. But that'd be one area where I think we do need to try and look at attracting in or offering some kind of incentive to bring in an Asia-based provider. Okay, I can't see the big transatlantic providers, looking at doing anything nationally. I mean, wherever they land their cable, it's got to be brought over to the locations where the businesses are centred. That's going to have to happen, and within that, there could be some capability to develop something, regionally or in the Midlands if you're bringing something across the country. The business case just isn't there in reality, or the critical mass of activity isn't there. So you have to start off with 1 or 2 or 3 companies in a certain area for them to be attracted into it. I think with over in Galway, you've got some of the gaming companies set up there, and I think there's a possibility that something might be done locally in order to develop a kind of an indigenous infrastructure that will attract digital media and content providers. But again, these are all 2 months off development, so it takes a while to get it motoring. Unless there's a more national view taken on rolling out the type of broadband infrastructure that's required to deliver it into the houses and the SMEs, we're still going to be behind the curve, I think, on that one. We're missing, there's 2, if you split that sort of sector up between gaming, online gaming, and there's gambling. We're missing a bit of a trick on the gambling side still. We're 4 years ago we talked about bringing in legislation for online gambling or remote gambling, and that still hasn't been crystallised. We've issued a white paper. There's been new talk coming out. There'll be something brought out at the end of the summer to clarify what the position is. But in that time, we've probably lost a lot of opportunities over to some of the locations like Gibraltar and Malta, where the legislation has been specifically set up and designed to support companies of this nature. We've also got to bear in mind the Americans. It looks like US are going to start softening their view on the hosting of the gaming platforms. These are the gambling ones back into the US, so that would be a further competition for some of the entities that are looking to come out of there into Europe. So we're probably missing a trick in that area at the moment, so the longer we wait, the more, because when this business doesn't come into Ireland, it goes away for 3 or 5 years. They're long-term infrastructure projects that don't have, you can't, if they're gone, they're gone. So you've got to be putting in place the type of legislation that's required to be able to support them. Take an example of a new provider coming into the marketplace and looking to set up. their first decision to be made to be where are they going to locate the site, because are they close enough to power that they can build their site on, and available power, the sort of capacity there. If you're in an existing site, I'd say realistically you're looking at 18 months to 2 years planning around bringing in significant additional power. There are some locations that have power readily available, but they may not have the telecoms infrastructure, or they may not have the workforce around it that they can attract in. So, but you have the proliferation of sites that you have is around the city centre and the various business parks, and it's kind of growing out that way, as you know. So there are pockets of space around the Dublin area, there's loads of power. And then there's areas where there's critical mass of facilities where it's tight. And in those areas you're looking at a kind of a lead time to bring in additional capacity, which is an inhibitor, which could make it the provider to look at maybe going somewhere else if they didn't have the power available in that location. The other thing on that area would be the price. Where, given my exposure now to what's going on across the other European sites, the decision for some countries to or companies to locate in certain countries to be very driven on what the cost of power is. And obviously, for someone like Paris, it's they're using nuclear energy, and it's 4 cents per kilowatt hour. We're double that here or more, depending on where you're getting your power from. So we can be uncompetitive immediately without having the ability to generate our own. So there's a number of factors we need to take into consideration. I mean, in general terms, the grid here is viewed very, very positively. So any of the North American companies looking at the Irish distribution grid would be delighted with its robustness, its redundancy, the resilience built into it. It very rarely goes down. So that's a sort of high tick in the box for us. But our pricing is just about competitive at the moment, and we just need to be careful that we don't make ourselves too uncompetitive, especially in a European context when we're looking to attract business in. We've never had a difficulty getting people. The process can take a long period of time, and you may, there are a lot of jobs out there at the moment for guys in technology with certain skills, especially around networking and operating system management and database administration and security, which is a lot of the sort of the core technology components that you need to run any business. So we can get the people. It does take a long time. My concern would be that the next wave of people coming out of universities, we may not have enough of them. A lot of them are emigrating. We may have another influx of people coming in from Europe to try and fill those jobs. It is the area of highest growth from an employment perspective. So there is a concern, most definitely, that we're not going to have the people coming out with the skills. Now we've talked a lot about retraining and taking people that have come off the construction industry and other areas that have really sort of been depleted, and reskill those people and look to get them back into the workforce in the technology area. That does take time. You could be looking at 3 or 4 years, and there's some great courses out there at the moment. I know IT Tal are doing a great course for retraining people. Lots of other universities are doing the same, but it does take time, and it doesn't always lend itself to somebody just can't suddenly move from being a guy that's been working on the construction site to being able to deliver IT services from a networking perspective. It just does take time to reskill people, so there is a concern there. The simple answer is no, I would say. But I mean, it's to qualify that. I mean, we probably sat on our laurels over the years because we all believed the workforce and the talented people and the education system and the leaving cert's the best out there, and it's very good. Don't get me wrong, but it isn't really catering for what's coming down the line. And given the openness of our economy and the reliance on all sorts of things happening outside, we really need to be competitive in that area. The Department of Education do move, but they move very, very slowly. And embracing some brilliant ideas that they've put in, like the broadband for schools and the technology that's been deployed in a lot of the schools, especially a lot of the newer schools, is fantastic. I mean, you wouldn't get it anywhere. Unfortunately, the ability to use it, to teach how to use it, and then use it as part of the syllabus isn't integrated at the moment. And it's taking time for that to come through. And I'm hoping with this new junior cert coming out and you know the syllabus has changed, and I do think that Rory Quinn is going to make a huge difference. Ultimately, he's a genuine believer in education. He really understands, I think, what's needed to be done to get it to the next stage. It's a bit like moving a very large tanker on the water to get it to make that change. But yeah, it isn't integrated. Some of the infrastructure is there, and again, and we've had this conversation before, there are the haves and the have-nots. Some of the schools, it's deplorable. I mean, you've no infrastructure at all. And then you've got some other schools which is fantastic. And then it depends on how up to speed teachers are in those schools to deliver on the capabilities that the school has from an infrastructure perspective. Maybe there's an argument to have a dedicated resource in those schools to the proper person teaching computers properly to people, how to use applications, how to code, how to get people up to speed. So it's a subject almost like English or maths, but it's a technology subject that everyone has to do, all of us.